Welcome, everyone. Good to see everybody today. We are going to be joined by Shearer and Sarah Baxendell today. So I want to thank you all for coming today. This is our impromptu session with Regen Network, and the session is called Decentralized Finance for Climate Resilience. And it spurred from a conversation I was having with Christian a little bit earlier on, and some of the work that Regen Network is doing, not Regen Intel, but also Regen Intel. We already heard from Chad. And we thought it would be really good to share some of this work. It's really pertains to what we're learning about climate and living a climate safe future. And so I just wanted to have this moment to really dive into some of the work that Regen Network is doing and give the opportunity for Christian and Sarah to speak. So I'm going to introduce Sarah and Christian. Sarah is working at catalyzing stakeholder engagement for climate change impact. She's a designer and founder of Hilltop Urban Farm, the largest urban farm in the US. She spearheaded master plans for 500 plus acres of urban parks and 125 acres of vacant land in the city of Pittsburgh. She currently leads the blockchain ecosystem at Regen Network and advises the blockchain carbon infrastructure working group. And Christian, who has been part of Trimtab Space Camp and also a friend and advisor to BFI for quite some time now, works and lives with compassion and integrity in the midst of our unraveling world. His work is really centered around living into a future that we all want to see. And he's co-founded Regen Network with Gregory Landau. And Regen Network is a decentralized community of ecological finance, including a marketplace for high quality ecological assets. At 24, Christian founded what has come to be one of the most well-respected permaculture education centers in Southeast Asia, the Pena Project. I would love for you to put a little bit more about that in the chat too, Christian. He's since devoted his working life to growth of ecological agriculture and the regeneration of the planet's ecosystem. He lives with his wife and his new baby daughter at his homestead in Northwest Washington State. Welcome, you guys.
Thanks so much, Faith. Yeah. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share here. Faith, I'm glad you mentioned our friendship. We've been friends for, 7 years or something now. And Buckminster Fuller Institute was actually a pretty critical role for Regen Network early on, as we were just forming our community of organizations. The nonprofit that we have was fiscally sponsored by Buckminster Fuller back in the day. So a critical piece of our evolution along the way. So thanks so much. And congratulations to Stuart for the new role at Buckminster Fuller. I'm so happy for you, and I'm so happy for Buckminster Fuller to get someone of such high quality into that role. I am excited to continue leaning in with BFI and co-create the future that we all want to see. So to share a little bit about Regen Network, my aim here is to have each of you leave this session with a greater understanding of what it is that we're doing, but even more importantly, that is just leaning in on strategies to transform this planet and to help accelerate the ecological regeneration of this planet. So to give you a little, in a nutshell, Regen Network is convening a decentralized community of scientists, technologists, farmers, ranchers, land stewards. We're building a software stack and a marketplace for natural capital. We're doing that in a way that is completely open source and completely governed by the community of actors. So it's not, we're trying to get away from the methodology of top-down dictation of what is real and what constitutes real ecological impact and what doesn't, and instead convene a world of scientists, educators, and people working on the ground to come up with that information in a decentralized fashion, so that we can accelerate ecological impact. Our belief and understanding is that there are people all over the world that are interested in leaning in on their own landscapes, farmers, ranchers, land stewards of all types that would like to be planting trees and stewarding their landscapes in such a way that brings about ecological regeneration. And there's a small but growing faction of people who are already doing that. And so our aim at Regen Network is to build an open and decentralized community of practitioners that are doing the measurement, are doing the reporting, doing the validation, and creating the transparency so everyone knows that what is being represented through this tech stack is honest and clear. And then those ecological assets can be built onto the platform, can be issued to those land stewards who have created that ecological impact, and they can sell those ecological assets to individuals, to corporations, to others who are seeking to offset their negative ecological impact, and thus earn an additional income from the work that they're doing. So, as I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for Gregory Landway as well, as the co-founders of Regen Network, what we are truly interested in is seeing a planet where humans and other species are truly thriving. It like deeply saddens me often when I look around this planet and see how much struggle there is, whether it's ecological struggle or social struggle or financial struggle. I just know in my heart of hearts that we can be doing so much better. As much as I wish that we could manifest a cultural revolution where people would reconnect with living systems and focus on relationships and focus on those heart-centered things that really matter to them in their lives, simplify, grow our food, play more music, do more dancing, these things. It's what I really want to see for the world. And yet, if I believe, or if we believe that we have a very limited time frame to affect real substantial change in ecological systems in our climate, then we may need to take a different tack. The cultural revolution, I want to be a part of it, and I want to continue making it happen. I don't know that that's going to happen in the time frame that we need when we're talking about climate resilience. So at Regen Network, we've chosen to use the lever of finance and financial incentives to incentivize those folks who are stewarding their landscapes and invite them into an open measurement of their ecological impact, share that ecological impact with the world, and be validated and rewarded for that impact. So my belief is that people are ready for that. People want to create positive ecological change. And they would also love to be rewarded for that, financially and otherwise. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Baxendell, who's our Director of Ecosystems at Regen Network. She can take us on a much more deep dive into the exact specifics of what we're doing and where we're at as a company and as a network.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Just give me 1 second, and I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint. My name's Sarah. I've worked with Team Regen for quite a number of years, at least 3 now. So definitely grateful to be here as part of the squad of planetary regeneration stewards. As my bio said, I'm basically an ecology nerd from a design background that has had the opportunity to help land stewards utilize the software tools that we've been building, and scientists dig into the platform for scientific innovation that we have developed. So our team is trying to incentivize the restoration of ecosystem function on a global scale. Our North Star is, can we restore ecology, and can we restore human relationship to ecology at large by creating software and science tools that help to financially incentivize what we consider to be right action in that environment. So our big goal is to try to protect and restore ecosystems by protecting and restoring our relationship to them. We sit in this world with a fancy acronym called ReFi. What that ultimately means is what Christian was describing, that we're using the blockchain as a technology tool because it's transparent, because it is a shared public governance system, to create software tools that allow us to work with land stewards and earth stewards and ocean stewards to use the financial system as a tool to address complex challenges, and specifically to restore ecology, to address the climate crisis. So ReFi is just like a fancy hashtag that you can follow on Twitter to see us and other people that are working at this intersection of planetary regeneration and ecosystem restoration and finance. So I want to put us in the context of where we sit in comparison to things that don't use blockchain technology. Blockchain is kind of a scary word for a lot of people, but it really just means that everything that happens is public, and everything that's happened can be governed by a community. So it's a public database tool and a public governance system tool. And we sit in a world where there are a lot of different types of carbon and biodiversity and water credit registries that, because they're not public, because their data is not public, their participation is not public, standards development isn't public, their trade, their pricing, all of that is privately held information. So there are all these bottlenecks that exist out there in the world for what we call legacy carbon registries. And the three big ones that you can Google and get a sense of that really represent a lot of the voluntary carbon market are Vera, excuse me, Gold Standard, and American Carbon Registry. And so we took a look a long time ago, many years ago, and said, what works well about these systems and what doesn't really work well to help people be able to develop their own ecological impact standards, and how people can self-coordinate. These are very top-down approaches, like Christian said. It's like a closed room of scientists, mostly old white guys, that make institutional decisions and then sort of slam them down on communities and say, meet the requirements. There's no room for evolution. There's no room for you to be a part of the process. You have to either agree to the standard to participate in these systems or not. And we've really taken a different philosophical approach and really a different pattern style for the design of how we think about these systems. We think about them really in inverse. We think about how can communities of land stewards and land trusts that protect urban forests, and municipalities that are replanting trees in parks, and farmer cooperatives in the Northeast. How can these communities that really are the closest to the land and have the most intimate knowledge of what ecological restoration looks like in their agriculture or ecology use cases in their specific location in the world, how can they have tools to allow them to define standards? So that could be anything from agroforestry in the Northeast to riparian buffer restoration along the Colorado River, or down doing syntropic agroforestry in Colombia. There's 1,000 different use cases of ecological niches and ecological activity across the globe. And so looking at this system, we've really said, how can you remove these bottlenecks by allowing for communities to create their own standards, govern their own standards, and drive location-specific science that then credits can be issued off of, and pilot projects can be developed around the world where trees are planted and apples are picked, and there are whole communities that can restore the ecology that they live in by being able to use the financialization of those ecological outcomes or ecological benefits as a way to get a new source of income into their community to drive and fund that work. So at the end of the day, our goal is to get money to land stewards, scientists, organizations on the ground that are doing ecological restoration work to help them do more work. So we approach this by looking at what are the technology tools and the intersections between supply and demand, which is, very much a market force equation. There are organizations that are producing credits that want to bring those credits onto the blockchain because it's quicker to sell them, it's easier to sell them, it's often higher price. And you have organizations that are trying to create climate impact. You have corporate buyers like Microsoft that we've worked with. You have blockchains that are in our blockchain ecosystem that are taking responsibility for their carbon footprint and offsetting, like Osmosis and Stargaze. And you have a whole community of people that are now looking at this marketplace and saying, there are not enough credits out there in the world that represent carbon or biodiversity or water or soil quality to meet the demand of all of the climate impact commitments that do exist by international corporations and by nation states that are now waking up to our collective climate impact responsibility. And so we asked ourselves, okay, if there's a big disconnect between the communities on the ground and the standards creation, and this big demand for these types of assets, how do we create systems that connect all of these folks together? So we approach this with really 3 different pieces of infrastructure. And I'm going to keep this really simple because y'all are not blockchain nerds, is my assumption that I'm carrying in here today. First, we have this system that we call Regen Registry. And this is where your scientists and your land stewards really start in our system. This is where, and I'll give you a use case. So I'll use Hilltop Urban Farm because it has a lot of pieces to the puzzle. So Hilltop Urban Farm, let's say it's a project trying to use Regen Network. It is a urban farm, 120 some acres in the city of Pittsburgh, that has a combination of a 80-acre forestry preserve that's like a very steep hill that no one can plant on, being preserved. And it has a combination of about a 40-acre urban farm. And in the process of developing that farm, we went through a lot of restoration because there used to be buildings in this particular location. So I want you to imagine just like a really big vacant field with like rubble in it, like bricks and pipes and other weird stuff under the ground. And so we spent almost 3 years literally pulling rubble out of soils, putting down cover crops, rolling them back into the cover crop systems of that soil and working first to restore that soil. Then we went around and mapped every tree and said, how do we protect every legacy street tree that still exists on this property? Big old London planes, 50 feet high that are like, you can't even get your arms around, big old trees. And then we sat down and said, how do we do a children's farm here? How do we build an urban orchard here to be able to supply fruit to the neighborhood and cider apples to the local cidery? How do we plant grapes here? How do we plant berries here? How do we plant hops here for the local breweries? And so when you look at a place like that, that's almost 10 years along in its development, and you look at the position of how it started, there's a number of different ecological benefits that have happened from that land restoration. And all of those different ecological benefits come from a very specific activity that can stand alone as a credit standard. So preserving the forestry hillsides and the street trees can become a carbon emission reduction standard because you're protecting that existing forestry stock permanently by putting it under covenant with a land trust. You can create carbon removal credits from the new trees planted in the orchard. You can create carbon sequestration credits for the soil organic carbon mass that was developed by doing many years of cover crops. So there's a lot of different ways that in agriculture and forestry use cases where you're preserving existing pieces of ecology or restoring pieces of ecology. And what our team does is sits down with folks that have these like really legitimate real world farmers on the ground, land trusts in the forest use cases and say, how can you design a scientific standard that defines what the benefits of these actions are? And that can be carbon, it can be water quality improvement, air quality improvement, biodiversity. Doesn't just have to be carbon for a carbon market. We take a much broader approach to ecology as a team. How can I say, okay, I made these actions. I know that there's these benefits. I'm on this land every year. I can see the biodiversity growing. How do I use science to quantify that? And really, literally, how do I write down that methodology for how I'm going to track that change of state on that land and that ecological regeneration in that place? And then how do I package up those benefits and basically say, Hilltop Urban Farm created X number of carbon removal tons per year from the work that we developed. Now I can take those assets, those benefits that I've created, and I can sell them to someone outside of my existing farm income, outside of my existing nonprofit land trust fundraising from, foundations and institutions that support that stuff at a programmatic level. How can I use this financial asset that represents these ecological benefits and sell it into the marketplace to organizations and individuals that want to be able to purchase and retire those credits, to take responsibility for aspects of their carbon footprint that, they've already changed their, electricity to renewable for their office. They've already changed the light bulbs to LEDs. They've already taken a look at what they can already do. And oftentimes the organizations just still have a carbon footprint that they can't really change their behavior any further and still operate. And our system of the marketplace links these farmers and land stewards with these credits, these ecological benefits that are quantified and verified and confirmed and real, with organizations that are looking for these types of assets and creating this financial partnership between both sides of that market to take money from corporations and institutions and essentially give it to land stewards because they're doing work that has direct benefits. And the reason we use blockchain for this is really sits on two pillars. One is all of that science data, all of that location data, all of that monitoring data, all of those reports, that needs to be public data. We firmly believe that ecological information should be public information. And what a blockchain basically is it's like a spreadsheet that the whole world can see. Everything that ever happens on that blockchain is a permanent record. You can't wipe a line out of that blockchain spreadsheet. Anybody anywhere can, if you know how to, you can go into the blockchain and see every single data point that was ever put on the blockchain always. And so blockchain sort of takes what is usually held internally at organizations and makes it public, transparent, and permanently accessible for all communities everywhere. So it really fits our belief system that data and markets should be fundamentally transparent so that actors can have real world information and make real world decisions. And what we've done with our blockchain, again, I'm going to try to keep this really simple for you all because it's actually really complicated, is we've developed a series of custom tools that allow for folks to take data like soil samples and anchor them onto the blockchain associated with their project. Take a monitoring report and attach it to your project permanently. Take a credit issuance report and attach it to your project permanently on the blockchain. And list credits when you've gotten through all of the required scientific monitoring steps into the marketplace and make them available. And in existing markets, typically the way this works is a land steward would partner with another professional group called a project developer. The project developer deals with all the paperwork stuff and the whole process here, and then takes a slice of those credits away from them for those services. Then that project developer typically goes and finds another third party called a broker, who then takes more credits from the farmer in order to sell them to someone and find buyers. And what we're trying to do in our system is take out all the people in the middle of those systems, and tools make it so that the farmer can design a standard, monitor land, issue credits, list them for sale, and go all the way through that system without having to call up a bunch of other parties that then take a slice of their money and a slice of their credits, and they end up not getting all the value from these corporate climate impact investments that they otherwise would. So we're trying to build tools that are on the software system of the blockchain and are tools for the scientific development process of land monitoring that make all of that public and make it such that anybody who creates a carbon credit standard on Regen Network can develop a club, an advisory council, a group, a nonprofit, a group of nonprofits. And using what we call groups can basically establish themselves as a group that governs a specific method. So let's say you all are agroforestry nerds. I'm just gonna label you all nerds of one eco label here. We'll pick agroforestry. You all could decide that you want to form an advisory council, that you want to together govern the agroforestry standard for creating agroforestry credits. And you can come together and make group decisions about how that standard should look and how that standard should change on the blockchain, where the whole world can see why you made those decisions and the whole world can be visibly public and available as a part of that governance process. So I'm going to keep it really simple from here. If you just give me a second, I need to get this link to put in the chat to try to, oh, it's very hard to find the chat. Okay. I want to give you all a link to this really cool thing we built. It's basically a Notion page that's publicly viewable that we call Built on Regen. And in this link, which I'll go back to sharing so you can see, there's this section here called Methodology and Project Developer. And these are all cards that are overviews of every project that is on the ground land steward project in Regen Network that is designing a new science methodology, designing a new credit type, doing a pilot project that impacts real world ecology on the ground. So this link is super cool for you all to dig in and say, who are all these people doing all these things on Regen Network? And to put the impact into just scale, to just give you some numbers, there are over 40 projects now designing new scientific methodologies with our tools. We are expecting over 2 million brand new credits that have never been made before in the world to come into the marketplace in 2023. And there are over 15 million hectares of land engaged currently in the platform. So when Christian and I started, this was just an idea. And now this is a really big community of people using these tools and designing credits and governing them as shared communities on the ground and shared scientific integrity perspectives. It's really evolved and catalyzed into something much bigger. And this fall, we launched for the very first time the way that you list credits, the way that you trade credits, the way that you sell credits, the way that you retire credits and buy credits in Regen Marketplace, which you can find at app.regen.network or off the Regen Network website that Faith shared. So now all these projects that are doing all this super epic science work and all these cool pilots on the ground, they're going to be producing credits, and they can not only produce credits in the system, but they can take them to market themselves. The credits are issued, in the case of Hilltop Urban Farm, Hilltop Urban Farm's team would get those credits. They would get to sell them themselves without people taking away any of that value from them, because the marketplace creates a disintermediated opportunity for ecological impact projects to gain additional value. And we have a big community. We're basically a pile of science nerds. We're a pile of technology nerds. We're ecologists and technologists. We work with all kinds of organizations across the globe that are blockchain based and super nerdy science based, like Planet Labs and Google Earth Engine and the World Economic Forum. And so we really see a world in 5 or 10 years that is, you know, a more connected financial market for ecological assets. And more we're seeing, countries talk about putting carbon on their nation's balance sheet. Companies that are on the stock exchanges being required to report sustainability impact information. So as we see the climate impact responsibility level growing of companies and nation states, work like what we're trying to do with on the ground land stewards in an open source way, totally public, very grassroots. The demand for this type of work is going to be ever expanding, is our hope. So I'm going to pause there. That was pretty much the basic gist of what the heck is Regen Network at a really high level. So I would be happy to answer any questions you have about the world of Regen Network or use cases that you have, because it's a lot of information. So thank you all for listening.
Sarah, I think you have
Sarah,
people that have raised their hands. Go for it, Christian.
Yeah, I want to pose to you a question that is one of the most common questions I get from people when we're talking about selling carbon credits as a means of trying to make the world a better place. A lot of people have the idea that if a corporation, like Exxon and Shell and all those big oil companies are buying up carbon credits, are carbon credits just a way for them to continue polluting and destroying the world and then like buying offsets so that they could say, look, we're carbon neutral? That doesn't seem like the world that we want to see. How do you reconcile all that?
Yeah, I love this question. So we don't have control over all the companies that we partner with for sure. But when companies are taking a look at their carbon footprint, they're looking at what's called scope 1, 2, and 3. And it's really like, what can I do inside of my business that I have control over? Like, I can change my electricity source to renewable. I can change the light bulbs in my office. Then it's like, what the heck is in my supply chain? How do I work with my supply chain partners for all the bits and baubles I get for whatever it is I'm making and selling? And what can I do in partnership with them that improves the sustainability of that supply chain? Could be electrical vehicles for delivery. It could be, can we not use so much scary palm oil and things maybe? Lots of different options. So typically companies are working through to the best of their ability, both of those. And where we come in the voluntary carbon and ecological asset marketplace is we really deal with companies that are already trying and they're just left with something that's left over. And they really want to make an ecological impact a lot of the times. And what we're focused on is creating the highest quality, most community rich project portfolio that we can as a network to say, if you're going to buy carbon credits, let's make them the very best we can. And let's take some of our grassroots community projects and try to get some of that money to them so that it creates this reciprocal financial cycle. So our hope is not to like let them off the hook. Our hope is to help them where they're at on their journey. And this is my personal opinion, is that we got to take every inch we can get in this climate change thing. Climate weirding is faster than we realize. And, I'll take anyone who wants to take real action into the ecosystem and into my worldview, because I think every tiny little bit is really going to be what adds up in 10 or 15 years from now. And I know that's important to someone like you, Christian. You actually have kids. I'm more worried about what happens to other people's kids when, we go away and they're left with the planet that's sort of on fire. Maybe let's go to some questions. I don't know how you want to facilitate this space. I see all kinds of hands and I don't know how we call on people. So maybe I'll let you do that part.
I was just going to say, so Mark has raised his hand first and we'll just bring them up to the stage.
All right. Thank you very much. So what about startups? And in our case, hard tech, not land, but we serve the land and we'll go in. And so we are a battery, solar, wind energy company developing breakthroughs that will not have the supply chain impacts that the ones today do. It's much, much simplified and far less expensive to build the capital for the factories and all that. So we could fund billions of dollars of critical work from our gross margins once we're in mass production through you as an ecosystem as we drive decarbonization by 2030, especially energy, transportation, and other things. What about offering discounts on our technology to network members as a way. What we're looking for, we're trying to raise money right now so we can get to production, so we can complete development. And so I'm looking at, save funders money and adverse impacts by our work. Is when we electrify the world, within a few years, they stop paying for the financing, and they've already stopped paying for the fossil fuels. And then all of a sudden it's like the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, I think happened on 15%. We're looking at 20 to 30% savings for most people when they decarbonize and go to electric vehicles, through a whole stack of values there. So could you expand from land stewardship to planet stewardship?
Yeah, so at this juncture, the white paper that drives the Regen Network blockchain has an ecological impact focused lens. But the cool thing about blockchain governance, because we have someone who's talking with us about expanding the network to include plastics pickup credits. And we've had other folks like yourself that are talking about other sort of planet positive technologies. The way in which that inclusion criteria for what can be on our platform gets expanded is through what we call network governance, which really means that there's a place online where you can propose that, hey, you've got this other use case. You would love to see the community have a discussion about whether or not we want to expand and include more use cases. And we let the whole community decide. And there are 18,000 wallet holders that vote on what is allowed on the Regen network. So it's a really big public discussions process. In regards to, partnering, technology that you have that you think might be of benefit to farmer and pilot projects, we can certainly connect you with that team and, allow you to share your information with those projects. We let all the projects in the ecosystem decide what's right for them. We act more as like, hey, here are these tools, here's how you use them. Let's facilitate the shared conversation, and how can we help you make the best decision for yourselves?
Is there a way that they don't have to be voting that they're going to spend the money on it? Or in other words, if you have a whole lot of different communities, you mentioned ecological impact. That's exactly, we are the most ecological impact besides changing agriculture, because we will specifically end the use of fossil fuels and nuclear power. Probably by 2030, which means a big part of it could be happening by 2025. So yeah. How does that, so that would fit the ecological lens. The question is, how, when we have no money right now ourselves, how would we just get people to say, okay, that's cool. And then someone like then you would figure out how the money is going to get created and delivered.
Yeah, so I would say in your specific use case, let's say your technology is adopted by a number of projects. You could develop a methodology for emissions reduction, somebody moving from fossil fuels to clean energy using your technology. And where it's implemented, where your technology is used, there could be credits created that represent that emission reductions approach. So you as a technologist implementing this in the field, it could become a methodology of its own.
And could we use an existing methodology? I'm sure there are many and well accepted technologies for measuring the impact of ending the use of fossil fuels in vehicles or in buildings, which is what we're really focusing on initially. So would, instead of us being, doing work we're incapable of doing, like creating a standard, that kind of standard, can we just borrow somebody else's standard and can you have a list of the ones that are worth that are pre-vetted?
Yes, there is a team. I'm sure Kristen can give you my follow-up information, but we have a whole team at the registry that has a list of pre-vetted methodologies and a list of methodologies that are currently being created. So that team could give you a sense of what is already on that list, and you could take a look with them and see if any of them meet your use case.
And do you have any investors, any forward-looking investors who would invest in something to help it happen rather than only waiting till the end and getting rewarded for what you've already done?
Yeah, Mark, we're gonna hold
Yeah.
on that question and
That's the last one. That's the last one.
Because there's several other people with their hands raised, and I
Yeah.
want to get
Okay.
Adam.
Hello, as a bio nerd working on a hilltop farm, how did you make the leap of understanding that blockchain was a technology that you could use and then implementing that into your process? First question. And then second question is, what would be a practical application of an individual like myself going on the Regen Marketplace to buy eco credits?
I'll take the second one, and then I'll pitch the why and how do we get to blockchain to Christian, because he was there and I wasn't when that happened. So if you, let's say, want to use the Regen Marketplace and you want to buy and retire some carbon credits, we have a team that can help you with this. So anybody can reach out to me afterwards. You set up a specific wallet to get a Regen wallet address. And then you put the right currency, which can be Regen now, in that wallet address. And you just basically go to our project page and you just decide how many you want to buy. And just like buying shoes, you can buy those credits. You can choose when you're buying the credits to have them transferred to your wallet in a tradable state, which means that you could resell them or relist them or send them to a friend. Or you can click the button that says retire these credits to my wallet. And then you get to leave like a whole cool note about why you retired them. And people leave like really adorable notes, like for the Western wilderness. And like Christian left one for his family. I left one for the forests of Pittsburgh when I retired credits. But it's a relatively simple process once you have the right wallet and once you have the right currency in the wallet. So if you want to reach out to me afterwards to info about that, we actually have a whole guide, which maybe I can find right now that explains it for you. And I'll pass the other question to you, Christian, while I look for this resource.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam asked about how did you realize that blockchain was a technology that could be used and applicable in this space? Well, there's a couple different answers here. That basically this is the why blockchain question. And if we look at the world of carbon credits as they currently exist, and if you watch a video recently by John Oliver, you'll see that there's lots of people that are poo-pooing on carbon credits and saying that the whole system is built as kind of like a facade that doesn't really do anything. We totally approved and cheered on that message from John Oliver because that's totally true. There's so much opacity in the carbon markets, and what we're trying to build is transparency. So to build transparency, you need a trusted data system, and blockchain allows for that, right? So anytime we are issuing carbon credits, someone can find out what the methodology is based on the hash that's on the blockchain of where that carbon credit came from. They can then click into the methodology, read the entire methodology, understand how it is that the carbon credit was issued in the first place and what methodology it followed, so that we can actually attest to the fact that real ecological impact could happen. And the second piece around that is double counting, right? So there's a couple of different ways in which carbon credits can be double counted in the conventional system. First of all, an issuer, somebody has a piece of land, they've grown a bunch of trees and said, we want to issue carbon credits. Well, they could then go and issue carbon credits on multiple different registries and sell basically the same carbon to two different folks, right? By building a tech stack that makes all of our information completely transparent, it's very easy for any other registry to call on the data from our registry and double check whether the same credits are there, the same location, the same vintage year. And then the second way that carbon credits are double counted is that if a person or a company buys carbon credits and then says, look, I have all these carbon credits, I offset all my carbon for 2020. And then the next year they go and sell those carbon credits to someone else, And then that person says, look, we offset our carbon credits for our carbon for 2021. That misses the entire point, because now you've used the same carbon twice. So using a blockchain, it's very clear about whether you can make claims, because you need to retire the credits if you make a claim. So, and once you retire, there's no way you can ever transfer those credits to anyone else. They're completely static in your wallet. They can never be sold or transferred again. So both of those reasons are totally legitimate. And then the third reason to use blockchain that I'm really excited about is community governance. So our entire tech stack is governed by a public community of people. Anyone can participate, come in and start studying what's going on there, study the proposals, create proposals, put them up on the chain, and alter and affect the direction that the Regen Network community is going in. Blockchain allows for that very easily. Let's go on to the next question.
Olga, do you want to turn on your video? You might.
Yes, hi. I'm so sorry. I'm driving. I couldn't reschedule my meeting, so I hope you can hear me. And I don't think you want to look at my chin while I'm driving and talking.
Sure.
So forgive me. Boy, I have so many questions after you answered the first two, but I'll just keep it hopefully brief. And you can be as nerdy as you want, because this is a wonderful nerdy community. So I don't think anything is too complicated, you know? So very much appreciate the work that you're doing, and very much agree with Sarah that we should use every ounce that we can to contribute to saving this planet. But my sort of concern that permeates a lot of work, not just this one, is biodiversity, you know, because it's easy to plant monocrop and call it carbon credit, right? So do you think about it, which I'm sure you do, but how do you address that concern that people are not driven sort of to one solution at the expense of the entire biosystem, sort of foregoing the complexity of biosystem? Thank you. Hey, training new generation.
Sarah,
Yeah,
Sarah,
I can probably take this. I think we take a couple of different approaches. One, for somebody to submit a methodology to the World of Regen Network, you have to submit a concept note. So there's sort of like a moment in time that somebody might be like, oh, you're just cutting down trees and making a palm oil plantation. And that's not what we're talking about. So there's the opportunity for us to kind of set expectations in the methodology process as to what we mean by ecological regeneration. And what we really mean is restoring naturalized ecology that is location appropriate for a particular place, rather than things like, oh, hey, cut down the Brazilian Amazon and throw up some more palm oil and call it carbon credits. So we have really a social process of avoiding those types of use cases, as well as the way that we look at credits in general is we look at it through a broader lens of ecological benefits. So yes, carbon could be one of those outcomes or one of those benefits. We also look at biodiversity, we look at water quality, we look at air quality. We ask folks to look beyond a reductionist just carbon accounting perspective in their projects. Because really we're trying to preserve and restore ecosystem function at a truly scientific level. So we do look at watershed and regional impacts of projects before we accept them into the platform process. So hoping that gives you a little bit more information about how we kind of manage and vet some of these different types of project activities.
I would add to that as well, that if a carbon credit did get approved by the community and people are like, yeah, this is a pretty legit scientific rigor around verifying the fact that carbon was actually sequestered, and yet it was something that you didn't appreciate. Our marketplace has transparency around the exact methodologies that are used. So certain people are going to be a lot more kind of like flexible about which methodologies they feel good about, and other organizations and people are going to be very clear that I only want to support the ecological regeneration of forests. I don't want to support regen ag because that's more controversial, let's say. So it's all transparent. You can find that out yourself. So we try to make that as clear and open as possible as part of our philosophy around it.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, go for it, Olga.
Oh, no, thank you. I just appreciate the dance. I have many more questions, but I can reach out personally if that's okay with Sarah and Christian.
Yeah, and Christian's also in the Slack channel. We have time for one more question, Jimo.
Cool, thank you. Hi, Sarah. It's good to finally meet with you across the screen. We've been in touch by email and Twitter. My question is, one of the big challenges with sort of solving for environmental collapse is natural capital and nature-based solutions operate on a much longer time horizon, geological time horizon often than sort of our species. So a lot of discussions are moving towards forward financing, being able to fund the work from a forward perspective. And there's also another huge trend, I think, very original to Regen Network, which is practice-based credit. So not necessarily outcome, but getting the work started regardless of outcome. So could you maybe compare and contrast these two thought processes? And I'm afraid we're running out of time. So yeah, that's just a very exciting point for me. Thank you.
Yeah, so with practice-based credits, what he's referring to is that we have a couple of methodologies that are not looking at the outcomes after an action has been taken. It's saying, I know that there are outcomes associated with actions. How can I incentivize getting started? So a clear example, which is being currently worked on by a gentleman named Ned on our science team, and was originally started by Giselle, our head of science, is the methodology for fiber shed, which is about sheep grazing in vineyards in Northern California, which I see Faith clapping, you know the Fiber Shed Club. But part of it is taking a look also at how the USDA approaches things. A lot of NRCS practices are, they pay the farmer for doing it up front, or they pay the farmer at the end of the season for a practice implementation. So a good example is a lot of farmers get paid for cover crop implementation. And so rather than waiting to pay people for smaller practice activities after the fact, when some of this stuff may be newer to the market itself, we are looking at how do you differentiate for being able to pay a farmer upfront for implementing cover crops. And on the platform, that becomes something where we're going to eventually have a better tagging system where it's clear, you know, is this a practice-based credit? Is this an outcome-based credit? And allowing people to filter for the different types of project activities they want to invest into. Carbon and credits as assets is really just about creating unit of account. We're looking at the timing change of that as well. And related to forward contracts, the 2 million credits that are coming out on the platform in 2023, we are crafting with those partners forward contracts with buyers right now, with the idea that if we can get them paid for their pilot project right now, they can catalyze a whole ecosystem of other pilot projects that they have waiting to go, but they need to get this first one out of the door, or they want some more financial sustainability for financing their project, because this is real people and real work on the ground that needs funding. And we're ultimately going to be architecting a new technical module on Regen Ledger throughout 2023 called the Forward Contract Module, that allows you to go onto the marketplace and say, hey, I want to fund this agroforestry project now. And I know I'm not going to get my credits for 2 years, but you know, I'm gonna put my $100 in and like contribute to the getting of them going on the project by being a part of a forward contracts purchase process. So we are thinking about how do you shift explanation and shift time horizon to incentivize in a lot of different patterns with the platform as we're evolving our project set. I hope that answers, but those were good questions. Very applicable for stuff we talk about internally on a design level right now.
Cheers, thank you.
Yeah, I would just say thank you to Christian and Sarah. We're at time right now. This is an amazing session. I've received many texts, many chats for people to save this session so I can share it out with the rest of the Space Camp as well. I realize that you're all still on spotlight, sorry. So if we could just quickly come off of mute and say thank you. And then we're going to do a mission lead session following this. This was a very impromptu session. So Christian, Sarah, thank you so much. It was packed full of information and information that people really want to follow up with you on. So
Thank you so much.
getting some pings in the Slack.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to answer